Welcome in to the Old Soul, New Soul Astrology Podcast. Thomas Miller along with Robert Glasscock. One of the things that we love the most is when you send us questions. You can do that by going to funastrology.com. In the upper left is an orange box. You can click that and leave us a question. But when people really start to think through astrological structure, that gets our attention.
Hello, I have a question about using the equal house system. By using this house system, if the ascendant is at the later or earlier degrees of a sign, the first house primarily ends up being in a sign that is different than the ascendant. So for example, if the ascendant is at 29 degrees Aquarius, the first house sign will be mostly in the sign of Pisces. In terms of what the first house signifies, such as identity and first impressions, will the sign of the ascendant or the sign of the first house hold a greater weight? So in the example before, would it be Aquarius or would it be Pisces that holds a greater weight for the first house? Thank you.
This is such a great question, and thank you. Almost all of us have this problem. Not that we have 0 or 29 degrees rising, but almost all of us have a sign on the cusp, and yet there's another sign in that house. And sometimes that secondary sign can take up the bulk of the house. For example, just as she pointed out, if you have 29 Aquarius on a house cusp, the ascendant, most of the house is Pisces. And it's not a matter of weighting them. Neither is more important than the other. It's just a matter of understanding the distinctions. You're looking here at the last degrees of a sign, and that's like the front door to that house, the ascendant or any other house. It's what people see at first glance. It's the way you may come across at first glance. Meanwhile, behind that, the bulk of the house is Pisces. In this case, look at the difference here. Aquarius by nature, now this is not a cut and dried general rule for everybody, but Aquarius generally is, first of all, it's a sign of utter independence. It's difficult. Aquarians are wonderful people. They're friendly as a rule. They're outgoing. And so intimacy is the problem with Aquarians. Too much intimacy, like a 24/7, 365 marriage, is a challenge for Aquarians. Their natural instinct is to avoid that because by committing to one person or one job or one situation, they are denying their own independence. The minute they make a commitment, they start feeling, how do I get out of this? It's not conscious, but the desire on Aquarian is to fly free through life. It's an air sign. Pisces, the bulk of that sign, is an emotional water sign, the deepest and most complex emotional sign that there is. So now suddenly you fall in love with this lovely person that's got Aquarius rising. And then you find out, they have all sorts of emotional vulnerabilities and sensitivities and interest in saving humanity or whatever else it is, or sometimes problems with Pisces that are related to things like alcohol or drug issues, evading responsibility, the negative side of all that. So you're looking at someone whose cusp comes across as, look at this girl or this guy, they're so great looking, or even if they're not spectacularly beautiful or handsome, they sure seem to be because they're so much fun, they're interesting, look at the life they're leading, and boy, are they great to be around. And then the next thing you wake up with somebody who's crying, depressed, needing some comfort and love. Maybe it turns out they have some secret problems, Piscean, that they didn't tell you about up front. They could have a child that you never knew they had. I mean, it could be anything. But that's the difference. The house cusp is like what you see. And the rest of if you have a sign like she's describing, the bulk of the house is Pisces, that's what you get. And they themselves will have problems with it. I think of the house cusp as being external conditioning. So the sign on the cusp tells you how you have been conditioned to think about that house. In this case, it's the first house, Aquarius rising. That's how she's been conditioned to see herself. Underneath that, though, is all of the Piscean complexity and emotional vulnerability and the compassion and the love for the underdog and the desire to be of service to people, those wonderful things. Or if they're on the negative side, then you have all the classic negative signs of Pisces, which is namely irresponsibility. And also difficulty in commitments too. And it's not that they themselves, they may unconsciously be drawn into relationships with someone who has a tragic life, someone who gets seriously ill, for example, or someone who has other problems that are quite serious, financial or otherwise. So it's not a matter of which one is weighted more strongly, is understanding the difference between a house cusp and maybe the bulk of the house being in another sign. But in fact, all of us, I have 10 degrees Cancer, Capricorn rising. Well, that's 20 degrees of my first house is Capricorn. But from, say the last third of my first house, that's ruled by Aquarius. But the sign on my first cusp is still Capricorn. I know I come across as Capricorn. I have Saturn in Cancer. Thank heaven, I hope through astrology, I've understood what my Saturn in Cancer, my chart ruler, really means in terms of feeling and listening to other people and feeling what they feel, trying to place myself in their situation so that I do understand why they behave the way they do or think the way they do or what their problems are, rather than judging them, which is Saturn's tendency.
How does that Aquarius show up in your life?
Well, I have Aquarius on my second cusp. So that's my approach to my self-worth and my self-value, my talents, and how I make money. So Aquarius on my second cusp is, here's a guy who does not want to he doesn't think of himself in traditional sense. He's different. He knows he is. And the things he values in life are not the things he's been conditioned by his family to do. That's Capricorn and all of that. So I make a living through, guess what? I went to Los Angeles to be an actor. Nobody does that if they want to have a steady, stable, secure career. So already I was breaking Aquarius, separating from my family. I followed my bliss to be an actor, which led me to Los Angeles, where astrology discovered me. And guess what I make a living doing? Aquarius, Uranus, astrology. You see what I mean?
Yeah, so that third of Aquarius that's in your first house, what do you do with that?
Well, I think, it's not a matter of what I do with it. I think people probably perceive me through my Capricorn ascendant and Saturn in Cancer. And then they are surprised when it turns out I'm not nearly as traditional or judgmental as they may have initially thought. In fact, I'm the opposite of all that, although I make judgments constantly with people. And I love this phrase, oh, you're so judgmental. And I say, you bet I am. The first thing I do when I wake up in the morning is to make a judgment call about whether to get up or not. All day long, we're making judgment calls. So people who throw that phrase, oh, you're so judgmental, that is so shallow, so superficial, and totally unrealistic. Everybody is judgmental. You have to be. Now, I'm not judgmental in the way that I'm condemning people, but I sure make a judgment call over, is this person telling me the truth or is this person lying? I'm a very bottom line kind of guy. I've got a lot of Virgo in me. I'm very much a show me kind of guy. If you're going to tell me something, prove it. I want to see where your sources are so I know where you're getting this information that you're telling me. So I don't take anything at face value because I couldn't. I was raised by parents with an alcohol problem. And as we all know, people are different when they drink. And that is unnerving if you're a youngster. You never know how they're going to be.
Okay, so let's play her scenario out to another degree, and that is, let's say that you have that later degree, I don't know, pick a number, 26, 27, 28, 29, whatever. You have a late degree ascendant. So let's just take Libra, for example. Let's say you have Libra 27 degrees. So then Scorpio is going to occupy most of the rest of your first house. Let's say that you have 2 or 3 planets in Scorpio and none in Libra. Now, all of a sudden, do you have a more scorpionic first house?
What you have is, again, one is not stronger than the other. If you have Libra rising, all else being equal, you will be perceived as somebody who is social, who's a lot of fun, who knows a lot of people, who can fit in anywhere, entertaining, all of that. Underneath it is Scorpio. And what that person is looking for is intensity. Intensity. So you get to know this fun-loving guy who seems to know a lot of people and shows up everywhere. But it turns out that this guy, when you get to know him, is a heck of a lot more intense and deeper, probably, than you ever anticipated. He will also tend to be more possessive than his appearances and his interactions socially would belie. He seems to just get along with everybody, doesn't judge anybody. He could fit in anywhere. Oh, no, he can't. It turns out he's always assessing intensity. Because what he's after is intense experiences in life, life-changing experiences with Scorpio. He wants to be transformed by love. Other people don't. They're not looking to be transformed through love. They already know who they are, and that's what it is. But that person is looking for that kind of scorpionic passion, intensity, which is anything but the superficial charm and sociability that would go along with the Libra rising. You see what I mean?
Yeah, and so that's where you blend the two together.
Yeah. But once again, I think the thing important to remember, the cusp is the ruler of that house. So if you have Libra rising, your chart ruler, your life ruler is Venus. Now, I happen to have Venus in Scorpio. I don't have Libra rising. And Venus in Scorpio is not the best position for Venus. But it's that difference between what's on the house cusp and maybe what. Now, if you don't have any planets, for example, if you have 26 Libra rising and no planets in the first house, then you don't have any archetypes in Scorpio. But what you do have is a secondary conditioning to be scorpionic, because it does occupy the bulk of that first house, if this is making any sense to you.
Yeah, and I was actually going to flip it around the other way. Let's say you had an early degree Libra. The reason I'm saying Libra is it's the rising sign right now while we're recording this. But let's say you had an early degree Libra and no planets. Then then Libra takes over, basically.
Yeah, and Venus,
yeah,
the ruler. Because if you have early degrees, let's say you have 3 degrees Libra rising, then the bulk of your first house is Libra, except for the last 3. I use equal houses. So the last 3 degrees of that first house will be Scorpio, which will be the sign on your second cusp anyway. So there's a lot of difference, I think, between that and having something like a late degree rising, because the late degree rising is that's the surface. Beneath the surface is all that Scorpio, all that Scorpio taking up the bulk of the first house.
And then what about 50-50? What if you have a 15 degree or a 12 degree or an 18 degree, something like that, where it's about half and half?
If you want to read it, and you can, my mantra, and you've known this from all the classes that you've been in, is make something out of everything you see. And you could absolutely read that. I probably wouldn't if it's 50-50. But when you're getting into maybe an in-depth reading, you certainly could read that and should.
Well, good. Hopefully that answers that question. And really good thoughts on getting under the skin of that. I hadn't thought about blending the two together.
It's such a great question because it applies to all of us, I think.
All right. Great discussion today. Thank you so much for this. And astrology does give us this advantage, if you will, this edge that we can look at situations and at least be aware of what might be possible. If you'd like to talk to Robert about your own chart or your own situation, the direct link for that is in the show notes. And on the funastrology.com website, you can leave us a question in the orange box up at the top, and also grab Kristen Lawhead's free lunar calendar. And also at the top is a link to our Discord channel, which is free, and hundreds of people in there continuing the conversation beyond the podcasts. Thanks so much for listening. We'll see you next time on Old Soul, New Soul Astrology Podcast with Robert Glasscock.